Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Brockopp side. Today we got ourselves a movie review of Iron Man, directed by Jon Favreau. So, this was the very first film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and stars Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, the CEO of Stark Industries, the leading weapons manufacturer in the world, who starts out as a careless billionaire, but then after he gets kidnapped by terrorists and sees just what exactly his weapons are doing to people, he decides to escape, return home, and do something about it, so he comes home and builds a high-tech suit which is later referred to as Iron Man. So now that Avengers Infinity War is only a few weeks away, a week less than originally intended, I figured it was time to just finally lay it all out and review every single movie of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I have yet to cover. So this film came out in 2008, which is just kind of crazy to think about because this movie is nearly 10 years old now, and this was a big hit when it first came out, and it was a much needed success for Marvel because up until that point they hadn't had a whole lot of success in their films outside of the Spider-Man and X-Men series. You know, they tried all kinds of other films through Daredevil, Ghost Rider, Elektra. So it was definitely time for another Marvel movie to be a success, and this was, and it holds up very well 10 years later. Well, I mean, minus a couple of MySpace references at the beginning of the movie. So it's really hard to imagine anybody besides Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark at this point. I mean, he goes from playing this careless billionaire playboy who has intercourse with all kinds of beautiful women to a serious character who realizes the damage that his company has done to people and decides to get serious about changing that, but he doesn't lose his sense of humor throughout it, which is very important, and this was just the stepping stone to the Iron Man who would show up in various sequels, the Avengers movies, and soon to be the third Avengers movie, which is just kind of crazy to think that we're already getting that far with it. I think it was Robert Downey Jr.'s debut performance as Tony Stark which kind of started to make Hollywood rethink the way they look at superhero actors, because up until this point, playing a superhero was kind of a quick way to kill your career, because up until then, you know, Adam West, who played Batman in the 60s, he basically got typecast and had trouble finding work. Same thing with Michael Keaton when he finished playing Batman in the 90s, and even Tobey Maguire, you don't see a whole lot of him anymore. I guess you could say the main exception to that would be Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, because he did have a very successful career doing other projects while simultaneously coming back to the Wolverine character, but I think Robert Downey Jr. is the one that truly cemented the fact that playing a superhero does not have to kill your career, rather it could enhance it. One thing I find kind of interesting about the movie is that it didn't have a full script, so Robert Downey Jr. and Jeff Bridges, they had to improvise a lot of their lines. They would call their acting coaches, which definitely, I think definitely improved the dialogue a bit, but it's always kind of interesting to think that when you have a lot of production troubles and don't even have a completed script, it usually will lead to disaster, but this time around, a lack of script I think actually improved the film. But then Iron Man 2 and 3 had full scripts, and those were not nearly as good as this one. So maybe they need to stop writing full screenplays or something. So aside from Tony Stark, this film also introduces us to some other recurring Marvel characters, including Agent Phil Coulson, Pepper Potts, Happy Hogan, Nick Fury, and Rhodey, played by Don Cheadle. You're not Don Cheadle! Yes, for the first Iron Man movie, the role of Rhodey was played by Terrence Howard, which, while he does give a good performance, it's kind of unfortunate because it's just one of those things at the very beginning of the Marvel Universe which kind of screwed things up continuity-wise. It's not the only continuity script, we'll get into that later, but it's just kind of a shame that they had to recast one of those characters so early on. Jeff Bridges plays Obadiah Stane, aka the Ironmonger, who is now the very first Marvel Cinematic Universe villain, and well, I think he does a good job. I mean, Jeff Bridges can do no wrong, for the most part. But the thing about Jeff Bridges' character is that he is the first villain to kind of jumpstart the Marvel villain formula, which is basically you take the hero and you make an evil version of the hero, which he does. He builds his own suit, it's way bigger, it's more intimidating looking, and of course he dies at the very end, which is something that pretty much every other Marvel solo film has done, including Ant-Man, Incredible Hulk, Thor to an extent, Doctor Strange, so it's just kind of a shame that he's kind of the stepping stone to that, but I still think he's a good villain, and Jeff Bridges definitely gives an intimidating performance when need be. So say what you want about Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts, she becomes kind of an annoying character through future films, but in this one it's her first time in the role, and she's definitely the most tolerable. You know, she's not like crying and whining about stuff every 10 seconds. She's more grounded. She's more together. She's not freaking up like, "Oh my god, I can't think. No, I quit. I can't handle it." Ah. So arguably the best part of this movie is watching Tony Stark build the Iron Man suit. It's just kind of fun to watch this character become the Iron Man character that we now know and love, going through the different tests of like testing out the flight and the boots and the repulsors and just figuring out, hey, I can use the repulsors to fire at people, or hey, maybe we shouldn't go this far up into the sky because ice is gonna form. So that's just kind of interesting to see the bugs and the prototypes. And one thing I also really liked about the Iron Man suits, because there are 3 in this movie, is that they kind of follow the evolution of the Iron Man suits in the comic books, because early on in Iron Man's history, his suit looked pretty much like the Mark I suit, and then it kind of evolved into the Mark III suit that we have at the end of the film. There are also a few different Easter eggs that hint towards the larger Marvel universe out there, like references to Captain America and the Hulk and things of that nature. It's also just kind of fun to re-watch this movie and just kind of think back to all of the things that we now know have happened before the events of Iron Man, you know, like Captain America, Hank Pym as Ant-Man, and things of that nature. Because we now know that all of this stuff has happened and it'll all be revealed later on, but we didn't know that back when this movie was brand new, because the idea of team-up movies and these characters coming together was such a new concept, and they weren't really in a big hurry to get to that at first. You know, there were a few different references to S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, the Avengers themselves, but they were definitely very focused on creating a solid, standalone movie, which is definitely really good. This movie also has arguably one of the best endings to any comic book movie, where Tony Stark goes in front of the press and says,
"I am Iron Man."
totally throwing out the concept of secret identities, making Iron Man and Tony Stark one and the same, and it's just an ending that sticks with you till the end credits. And speaking of end credits, this movie also started the tradition of post-credit scenes, but instead of current Marvel movies where there are 5 of them, this movie only has 1, where Tony Stark comes back home and Nick Fury is waiting for him saying, "I am Iron Man. You think you're the only superhero in the world? Mr. Stark, you become part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it yet." And then he comes out of the shadows and he tells Tony Stark, "I'd like to tell you about the Avenger Initiative." Which made every Marvel fan in 2008 just go, So all in all, Iron Man is still a fantastic solo film which laid the groundwork to the much larger, expansive Marvel Cinematic Universe we know and love today. So those are my thoughts on Iron Man. Definitely check it out, but what am I saying? It's 10 years old and it's the first Marvel movie. Of course you've seen the damn thing. But anyway, if you guys have... Are you fucking serious? But anyway, time out down below, check out my Incredible Hulk review coming this week, and we'll see you on the Brockopp side.